Hey everybody, it's me, Angela Walters. Welcome to my weekly live chat. Although I guess it's not really a weekly live chat if I missed the last 2 weeks, but I'm super glad to be here now. We had some inclement weather 2 weeks ago, and then last week I was on vacation, enjoying some time with the hubby and just relaxing. It was great. But so much has happened since the last time we chatted. It's been a great couple weeks. Of course, the Chiefs won the Super Bowl. That's always great. Great game, man. I know not everybody loves football, but it was a good game. Came down to the wire. Anyway, and then also working on new Midnight Quilter episodes, which the next one will be coming out next week. Working on challenge stuff. I've just been all sorts of productive. But this week in this live chat, I'm going to talk about a quilt I finished for Tula Pink. And if you're watching live, thank you. Be sure to like the video. That lets YouTube know that you think what I have to say is pretty interesting. But if you're watching live, you can type your questions out as I show the pictures of the quilt. And Jessica, my right arm, my partner in crime, is here monitoring the chat, and she'll pass them to me and I can answer them live. If you're not watching live, no worries. You can just leave them in the comments, and I get on there from time to time to answer them. So during the weekly live chat, if this is your first time, I'm so glad you're here. If you're one of my regulars, I love it because I feel like I'm getting to know everybody. It's definitely so much fun. I always talk about something quilting related. Sometimes it's a little bit more teaching than other times. And I have had this topic in my back pocket for probably a month now. So a question came up one time about the way I collaborate with Tula Pink. And I'm sure you all know who Tula Pink is. Fabric designer extraordinaire. So much talent in that brain of hers. And I've had the pleasure of working with her for a long time. I was pregnant with my youngest child when I started working with her, and Haley is now 13. It's crazy how fast time flies. So I like to say that Tula's kind of like my work wife. We have so much fun collaborating and working together, and we're kind of two sides of the same coin. But the quilts that we put out are so fun and different because, obviously she gives me such great stuff to work with. And so a question came up, what is that collaboration process like? What is it, what happens when Tula gives me the quilt? And I thought, so I finished this last quilt for her and I took some pictures, I took some video, I'm going to talk over it, just kind of show you how it came about and kind of tell you a little bit about what was in my mind when I was picking the designs. It's so hard to do one of these topics though, like, the design process, because some of it's so instantaneous, right? I'm like, that would not be good, that would be good. But I'm going to try to distill it down and kind of break it down for you. I love working with her because really the quilts that she gives me are so unique and different and so bright and fun, and everyone is just a new experience. So when we worked together, and especially back in the beginning, she gave me a lot more direction than she does now. It's pretty funny. We've got this down to like a slick routine. She has her social media guy drops off the quilt. I pick it up. We really don't talk a whole lot about it. She just gives it to me, and I'll be like, I guess that's the new fabric collection, or I'll get to work on it. And so sometimes if she has a particular thing in mind, she'll point me in a direction, which I love. I want to be given some direction, but then let me come up with the fun stuff. So without any further ado, let's look at the actual quilt. So this, if you follow her on Instagram, she does her Talking Tuesdays, and she talked about this one, I think, last week. And so you can kind of see a little bit more of what went into the quilt. Not so much, she talked about the quilting, but as far as the design goes, the color placement, the pattern, so cute. And when I opened this up to start loading it and get ready to quilt it, I practically squealed. You need to know that it's very unusual if Tula gives me such big areas of background space and in such tonal fabrics. So I was like, this one is going to be fun. This one's going to be about the quilting. And so I loaded it on my long arm and then thought, crap, I need to take a picture of it before it's quilted. And so this is the picture I got. It's really hard to look at a quilt and imagine it quilted any other way. So it's always nice to look at the unquilted quilt and kind of see what I was working with. So when I open up a quilt from Tula, if there is some direction, she'll give it to me. But my whole goal is to blow her mind with the quilting. What's something different, something unusual? Are we good, Jex? Okay. Something unusual, something different, something that is going to wow her. Because if you think about our marriage being so long, we've got to keep it spicy, right? So when she gave me this quilt, I love to highlight the fabrics or highlight the story. She always has such a great story for her fabrics. And so when I loaded this, I start thinking of I don't know, what's the main thing? What's something I can do that's going to be interesting? And this charming quilt pattern is so cute. I think it's called Still the Night. And I love the little potion bottles. And so I've often thought, wouldn't it be nice if there was some kind of potion, some kind of pill or drink or snack or wine that you could drink that would give you quilting skills, machine quilting skills. And so in my mind, I imagined that each one of these little vessels, each one of these little things, you could drink and quilt a design, or it was inspired by a design. So that was kind of the story I made in my head. Now, when I got started, I'm like, oh, how do you make that come to fruition? And so we're going to see kind of it in progress and what it looks like when it is finished. I do want to point out, though, before I show the quilting pictures, this is me quilting things to death, right? This is me showing off a little bit. So it definitely doesn't have to be so over the top if you want it to be impactful. It can definitely get the same effect with less dense quilting. Now, I know it's kind of hard to see the quilting right here. I have some closer up pictures, but it just kind of shows you the finished product. And one thing that I was thinking of when I was looking at this quilt, it's very easy to overwhelm the quilt top with the quilting. So I really want to be careful. Now, with Tula's prints and her beautiful bold fabrics, there's really not a whole lot I can do to take away from them. I mean, they're the star. It's going to shine. But I didn't want it to be so chaotic and so crazy. So instead of quilting every one of those little jars with designs all around it, I kind of picked and chose and kind of sprinkled them in just to keep it from being too crazy and just too much. You really want to leave the eye somewhere to rest and to look. So let's look through some of the quilting afterwards and you can kind of see that process, and then I'll show you some videos that I took. So in these little vessels, I have a couple of different things to be working on here. That didn't make any sense. I have a couple things to focus on. The fabric in those little vessels are so cute. And so how do I show off that fabric? And then how do I do this stuff in the background without overwhelming it? So there's a lot going on in this quilt. There's swirls, there's pebbles, there's this kind of merged line design. The first suggestion I would give, should you embark on something like this, is using a blending thread color will really help. So it's so important because I want people to look at the quilts, I want them to see her beautiful fabric, and then a split second later, I want them to come up closer and look at the quilting. So using a thread color that kind of blends in is going to give me that texture without overwhelming it. But I'm comfortable enough with Tula. We have enough of a history that I know that I can sprinkle some things in there that maybe I might not do on other quilts. And so I did use some contrasting thread colors in some places, and I'll show you here in a second, just to pull out some of those details. Again, very sparingly. It's very easy to go overboard, so I'm trying to kind of add interest without, overwhelming the whole thing. And my computer is locked up. Let's go to that one. So here we can see a little bit closer. So in the background, I used a light, bone-colored thread, so it's light cream, something that blends in beautifully, and then just had fun quilting the different details. And I'm going to show you what that looks like here in a second. One question that I get asked a lot, and maybe Jessica's already written this down. If she has, she can just cross it out. How much do I plan beforehand before I get started, right? Like when I get that quilt and I load it, how much planning do I do beforehand? In the beginning, when I first started quilting, there would have been a lot more planning. But now I feel comfortable because I know what designs will look like. I've done it a couple times before, so it's not so scary. So I actually don't plan it out at all. I load it and I get going. And that's for two reasons. One, usually Tula needs the quilt pretty quickly. So there's no time for dilly-dallying. And second, even if I took the time to plan out all the different designs, chances are I would change my mind. So I know usually at least one thing I'm going to do somewhere so I can get started. And then the rest just kind of flows from there. Now, if you're listening to this, if you're watching live or watching later and you're like, okay, Angela, that's just bragging, showing off. Well, that's just from experience. If you think about making quilt tops, people that have never pulled fabric together or picked out fabric for a quilt really struggle with it. But after you've done it a couple times, you can look at a quilt and imagine it in black and white, and it just gets easier the more you do it. So again, it's not like I'm trying to say, oh, wow, it's so easy, but you don't have to have a plan to get started. Now, when I thought about the fabric collection, which is a rework of her nightshade, I remembered we did some creepy feathers on some other quilts like that. So I wanted to pull out some of those details that were in those earlier quilts, like the little spider web at the bottom of that pink little jar. I have to admit, I am so easily amused by the quilting. It's kind of funny or embarrassing, however you want to look at it. But I thought, in my mind, these sisters don't always quilt their own quilts, so maybe some of the potions don't get used, so there's spider webs on them. But I think it shows that quilting can be fun. It doesn't have to be serious, and I really don't take myself too seriously or the quilting too seriously. So I decided I'll add in some of those little spider webs, and I'll add in some details in there. And you can kind of see a little bit closer or a little bit more detail there. So when I got towards the halfway mark, I thought, I really should record some of me quilting. Maybe we can see what that looks like. And so towards the end, I thought, I took a little bit of video, and I'm just going to talk over the footage I got so you can see how it comes together. This little pink jar is the swirl potion. Can't you tell? You drink it, and then you can quilt those swirls. If I could figure out how to do that, I probably could make some money. All right, so first of all, the jars themselves. When I'm looking at a quilt with repetition, I like to pick a design that can be used in a lot of different sizes and shapes. And each one of these little jars were like some short ones and some tall ones. And I thought, what can I do to give it that look that there's actually something in the jar, right? Again, I'm overthinking it, I know, but it's midnight. I'm having my wine and I'm quilting. That's nothing else to do but overthink it. So I decided to keep the quilting pretty geometric in the empty part and then do some swirly kind of designs in the rest. And so here we can just kind of see how I handled those areas. Now what's nice about this idea, just adding some straight lines and echoing, it's something that can go in all of those different shapes. It can fit in all the different ones, and it's going to just give it a different look. So quilting straight down and then kind of echoing the side up to the point. You can kind of see here, it's going to angle up a little bit and be closer, but I love how it's skinnier at the top and then wider at the bottom. Whenever I'm stuck and I can't decide how to quilt something, this is really one of my go-to designs or go-tos because it's just nice and simple. I knew I was going to do a lot of dense quilting in the background, so here I'm just kind of taking it a little bit easier and just adding that nice little bit of detail. And so you can kind of tell how that comes together, and we can go a little bit faster. We can see on both sides. One thing I say a lot, and if you watch any of my videos, it's so important to keep it symmetrical. So if I have 2 lines on one side, I'm going to do 2 lines on the other. As long as it's symmetrical, it's going to look great. So here you can kind of get an idea of what that looks like, gives it that look of that, not really curved, but kind of. And then it just gives that geometric look. What's great, again, is I know that this idea I can do in all the different blocks. So if you're working on a sampler quilt or quilts with a lot of different shapes, that's going to be an option for you. Let's skip ahead a little bit. And same with the little stoppers, right? So just keeping it nice and basic. So the thing is, you don't have to do difficult stuff over the whole quilt for it to be impactful. So even though I had all these plans in my head for the background, it doesn't mean I need to do really complex stuff in other places. I can kind of pick and choose where to put that effort. And so here you can kind of see me just adding some more echoing. And even with the differently shaped blocks that we had, again, you can kind of see the same idea of quilting straight down the middle and then adding my echo lines. One of these days I might go through and actually, edit this down and put some voiceover to it, but you can just kind of see how it comes together. So once I picked out one part, then I know, okay, great. The top of every little jar is going to get the same kind of thing. But what about the prints in the bottom? So if we look at the different prints, first of all, this pattern is just great for her fabrics. It really does show off the different prints. Well, I wish I could quilt that fast, right? And then even here in those little test tubes, same kind of thing, except they're just going to be straight down because there's no angles to echo. So once I finish those, and as I'm working down, then it's time to figure out what am I going to do in the fabrics or in the background. And so this was the first one where I was like, okay, I have this jar. I love the bubbles, love how she sprinkled them in there, so cute. And I thought, wouldn't it be fun if I used a green thread and added some more bubbles like it was piecing? And so I'm not going to lie, it was a little scary because I'm like, contrasting darker thread on lighter fabric is always a little scary, but I super love how it turned out. So looking here first, I'm going to quilt those little bubbles, and then I'm going to add some more in the background. I'm just kind of imagining where I'm going to put that. When I'm working with the piecing, we can kind of get closer, zoom in, right? So all that cute little block there, and so just stitching around the seam and then adding a little swirl on the inside. The one downside to this, especially if I'm using this contrasting thread, is there's a lot of starts and stops. So, and I'm fine with that, right? Because it's worth the result. But if you're pressed for time or you don't want to spend that much time on it, then maybe a different design option would work. So I just went through and added those little swirls with that green thread that kind of matches that beautiful solid color. And then once I finished those, again, every little one's a start and stop. Good thing Tula, good thing I love her. So it works out good. Looks quick, 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 quick. All right, once I did that, then I thought, you know what, let's add some more piecing with the quilting. And so once I finished that, kind of picked and chose a couple more places to add some green bubbles. Now, even though the thread contrasts, I'm not doing anything that's really thread heavy or anything that really like, I don't know, is going to really draw attention. It's just going to add a little detail. It's kind of fun. And it was very scary because those circles were about $half size, and that's not easy to freehand, especially with a contrasting thread. And when I did the first round, I could tell that you really couldn't see it too much, so I went around it a second or third time. So it was definitely a little like, okay, let's try to get this and see how that works. I love having a glass of wine while I quilt. I just made sure I did this before I drank my wine. Make sure I had total control. But as I'm adding those those colorful bubbles, I want them to look like they're coming out of there too. So maybe just like a half bubble here is what I kind of did to give it that effect. So just kind of visually looking and seeing where would that look kind of fun, where would that be? And then when I'm done, you can kind of see just a couple little bubbles there, just for funsies, even kind of having fun with the different sizes. All right, so once I had those, I knew I wanted to add more pebbles, more bubbles. The problem was I definitely didn't want to do it in green because that would be very distracting. So then that's when I switched to that blending thread and just kind of added some more bubbles. I wanted them to look like they were kind of like just bubbling out of that jar. One thing though, I keep saying bubbles because that's what it represents, but they're pebbles or, circles. It's very tedious to quilt lots of tiny circles. It's very time consuming. So here I'm kind of quilting some bigger ones and some littler ones just to break it up, kind of give it some interest. And let's be honest, it goes a little bit faster too. So that's always nice. So when I'm looking at the area, I need to put the main element in first and then fill in around it. So if you're ever looking at a quilt and you're like, oh, what came first? The main portion goes first and then the filler fills in around it. So again, like how I did those green circles first and then filled in with the matching color. I'm sure somebody's going to ask, and I should just preemptively say this, how long it took me to quilt this. It's almost impossible to tell because it's quilted over a series of little times. I have no idea. Next time I will keep track of that because I know that's always a question that's interesting. So again, using the colorful thread to really just pop just a little bit and then coming in with a thread color that blends just to keep it from overwhelming. I think that's all just pebbles, pebbles, pebbles. By this point, I'm listening to my audiobook, I'm drinking my wine, I'm just quilting and having a great old time. And so here we can see the finished section. I wanted it to kind of look like it was just bubbling up and over. And you can also see to the left side where the swirls, I already quilted those swirls, and then now I have the space in between them to fill in, right? And then that's where I did some different designs, and we'll talk about that here in a second. Hold on a second, I think I might have skipped too far. Yeah, oh here, this will zoom in closer so you can see it. So again, just that nice texture, a couple of pops of color. If it didn't look good, I would have left it if it's not done it again. But there were some sections where I did the same thing with like a pink thread. I mean, here, this is a pink thread over here with those swirls as well. So it's just a little bit of contrast. So, I mean, you can make rules and then break them if you want. It's totally fine. All right, then when it came to the actual prints in there. So this is the money, like this is what Tula is selling, her beautiful fabric. And so I want the quilting to really highlight the fabric, even though I'm doing a lot of crazy stuff in the background. So she has already taken the time to design the prints. All I have to do is quilt along the lines that she designed. So it makes it easy. But sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. So this print, so cute, love the swirls. So I'm just kind of going around, kind of hitting some of those swirls, and then just filling in the rest of the area with the filler. If this is something that you try, don't think that you have to quilt along every single line in the fabric. That's not the case. I'm just using it as a guide, just kind of as a I don't know, like a inspiration. So we have these swirls, these echoes. I could just go along, get it kind of close, and then fill in the rest with a filler. I'm not going to try to quilt around every little lightning bolt or little star in there. I'm just going to go around the things I can and then put a filler around the rest. And that's just going to help make parts of it pop out and, again, help highlight that beautiful fabric that she designed. So if it's more of a tonal, I'm going to do something like this. Maybe pick out a couple things. Or if it's something like there's nothing to go around, it's maybe like a dot or something, then I'll just do something with a nice texture. Something that is quick and easy for me to do that's not going to be too fussy to take away from the fabric. Again, I know that she loves me, but the most important thing here is not my quilting, it's her beautiful fabric. So there you can see going around some of those elements. But when we're dealing with focal prints, really large prints with really strong details, then it's fun to add even more and go around those even more. And so here you can kind of see finishing, finishing, finishing. There's the end result. And here's what I love. I'm going to pause it real quick. Oh gosh, I'm going to say this out loud. I'm going to sound like I'm neurotic or whatever. But my rule is I love contrast. I love different stuff next to each other. So if I have straight lines on top, I like curves on the bottom. So for some reason, that makes me very happy to see those two. All right, but in those bigger prints, right, there's a lot of detail here. And so I know that I can really show off that print. Not that there's much I could do to take away from it because it's so bold. But here's the thing about me. I do not like quilting over faces. It's not even like for any reason except it's hard. We all know what a face is supposed to look like, and if you don't get it quite right, it's going to look wrong. Abstract stuff, who cares, right? If it's a swirl, it's a swirl. So when I'm dealing with stuff like this, I try to add as little detail in the face itself as possible. Again, just because it's too easy to know if it's wrong. And the same goes for animal faces. But I can still add some detail and go around the elements in that print. And so switched out to a lime green thread. Anytime I get to use fun, bright colors, it makes me so happy, and just kind of went around some of the detail. The trick here is to keep the line smooth. If you're focused so much on trying to hit that line perfect, you're just going to constantly be auto-correcting and you're not going to get that smooth look. So try to relax, try to just go with the flow and get it kind of close. So here we can see in the face, I went around the eye patch, down in the nose just a bit. If I leave that whole thing unquilted, it's going to pop out and it's going to be noticeable. So I want to add a little bit of detail to those bigger areas. And then going around the hair and then adding some detail in the backgrounds, just having fun with it. When I'm quilting, especially for Tula, going around those fabrics, it's going to just help, first of all, make it easier for me to pick designs, but help show it off and help kind of add that detail to it. Using a contrasting thread color, again, is a little scary, but definitely the result is a lot of fun. So in this particular block, though, we have that cameo, that portrait, nice and beautiful, and I love how the hair turned out. You'll see here in a second. But then around the outside, it's really pretty. It's scroll and all that kind of stuff, but I'm not going to quilt around all that. It's going to take too long. And I do love Tula, and if I was going to do that, I would do it for her, but I don't have to do difficult stuff over the whole quilt. So after I finished the hair and the inside, around the outside, I just did some wishbones around it. So it's just great to show, like, you don't have to do a bunch of over-the-top stuff. You can pick and choose where you want to put that effort. Again, I just love bright thread on dark fabric. So pretty. So that green kind of thread. Let's scoot ahead. There's me quilting real fast. And then again, once I get to the outside, I'm still at the hat. There we go, wishbones. I don't know if it's a ribbon candy or wishbones. But then again, just picking a filler that wraps around, nice detail, and then the star is going to be the face in the middle. So if you do have those big, bold prints that you finally use, you're not sure how to quilt it, going around the detail is definitely going to be the way to go. Let's kind of zoom ahead. You can kind of see as I'm working my way around, and then lots of fun. So there's a lot of thread changes in this quilt. And it's worth it because I know the result is going to be great. I want the thread to match. So as I'm working my way through the quilt, if there's a lot of thread changes, I just go ahead and handle them right then instead of doing just one color and coming back. But if there's only like one or two little, I might save it for the end. It really just depends on what kind of mood I'm in. All right, then after I add all those elements, then it's time to fill in between. And so here's kind of the close-up where you can kind of see where it all comes together. If you look in the background where those curved kind of straight lines are, that's the merged lines design. If you joined us in the Fillers Free Motion Challenge, you would have seen how to do that. The thing about that design, though, is it works better in narrower spots. So instead of quilting it over the whole area, I was able to use some pebbles, some other designs to break up the space and then make it a little bit more manageable. So even within the background, having your main elements and your fillers and picking that out. Now, the reason I went with the merged lines design, or that kind of straight line, is it's so interesting but easy to do. And I knew that I could use the other quilting to kind of make that area more manageable and fill it in. So sprinkled throughout is some more pebbles just to break up the space. I wanted the pebbles, if you look kind of on the left behind the tall wine glass, that's what the wine bottle, that's what I call that. You can see some pebbles going behind it. What those pebbles are doing is adding some texture, but I'm using those pebbles to break up that space and make it more manageable. I have the swirls over here, pebbles over here, and now I just have smaller pockets to fill in. It's kind of like that saying, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. And so just kind of adding my details and filling it in. Now what happens though, if I get to a section and I don't love how it turned out? Well, I just don't do that again. The thing is, when you step back, and there's so much beautiful stuff on this quilt with the fabric, nobody's gonna know where to look. All you see is that overall texture. And if I don't point out my mistakes to you or Tula, then nobody will know where they're at. So the thing is to not worry too much when you get started on a quilt, just to relax and have fun with it. Easy for me to say, right? Because I'm on the other side of the sucking, right? You start something, you suck, and then you're good and it's fun. But try not to worry too much about having it all planned out, because ultimately it should be a lot of fun. So then once I'm done with the quilt, the best part is the unfurl, where I pull it off of there and I get to see it in all of its entirety. As I'm working through the quilt, especially on a long arm, I'm just seeing it in sections and I'm like, I hope this all comes together nicely. And I was super happy with how it turned out. Gave it to Tula and then she sent me a very nice text. So again, really fun when you have these quilts to work on, that you can add your own style, your own detail with the quilting, but still have it contribute to the overall end bit. All right, so I see Jessica writing really fast. I'm gonna have to get you a hand massage or something, because a lot of questions. So I'll definitely answer those right now or here in a second. Again, when you're starting out on a quilt or you're trying to decide how to quilt it, it can be overwhelming, especially if it's an important quilt. It has a big reason, it's for a dear loved one, but getting started is just the best way to get it finished. It's the starting that stops most people. Do I ever start quilting and decide I don't like what I've done? Oh yeah, yep. And it's not even like, sometimes it's I don't like what I've done, or sometimes it's just not, it's not my night. Kind of like a major league pitcher. Every once in a while they have bad outings. If that happens, if it's really I don't know, I'll walk away for a little bit and come back. Usually that helps smooth it out. And then I just switch to something else. The joke is, once is a mistake, twice is a design choice. So if I do it in one spot, I'll make sure I do it somewhere else, and then I'll call it a design choice. But yeah, but that just because I don't like it doesn't mean that somebody else won't like it. So it's just up to you. What batting did I use? So that's a great question. For Tula's quilts, we love to do 2 layers of batting. It really helps the quilting show up. It helps it hang nice and flat. It's great for photography. And so it's 2 layers of Quilter's Dream poly batting. Why poly batting? Well, there's a very deep, profound answer. It's just the batting I had, and that's just that's what I used. You can use different stuff too. But it makes a very heavy quilt. I know I've talked about this before in the live chats, but if you are going to try that, wall hanging, maybe not a bed quilt. Although Tula does have a quilt on her bed that has 2 layers of batting. I don't know how she gets out of it in the morning, but do I quilt in long sessions or shorter sessions? It depends. Really, my quilting is determined by what's going on at home. So the funny story is, we have a quilt shop here in Liberty, Missouri, just outside of Kansas City. If you're ever driving through, come see us. And we bought the shop because I wanted to move out of my house and quilt there. Not me move out, but move my machine out of the house. And so that never happened because the shop was too busy. So I still quilt from home. And so it just depends on what's going on. The Chiefs parade was going on, and so I had that evening off because Jeremy went to the parade, and so then I just quilted for a few hours. But sometimes it's literally 5 minutes. I have a rule that I like to break sometimes, but I always keep a quilt on my frame so that I can always jump on there real quick, and even if it's just for a few minutes, it just makes me happy. Is it okay for some areas to be more densely quilted than others? Heck yeah, it's okay. It's actually preferred. No, that more dense to less dense is going to add contrast and show off whatever that is. So I use the idea of the more and less dense to draw attention to particular areas. So after I quilted those swirls so that they wrapped around, those lines were spread out further apart, so the filler was a little bit more dense to give it some contrast. So absolutely. The one thing, this wasn't a question, but I'll just say it out loud. The one thing that comes up with that is, will it make the quilt wavy? If you're a show quilter and you have these different densities, is it going to make it hang? And I honestly, I don't know because I'm not a show quilter. But other than that, I don't have any problem with it. So yeah, definitely. Do I think the effects could be done on a domestic versus using a long arm? Absolutely. Absolutely. In fact, it might be, it's kind of like a, I don't know, catch-22. Quilting on a sewing machine can be a little bit more difficult, slower, especially if I'm using 2 layers of batting. I wouldn't probably never quilt a large quilt with 2 layers of batting on my sewing machine. It just makes it way too bulky. But yeah, like you can get the same effect. On a sewing machine, you can start wherever you want. I could have, on a sewing machine, went to all those little potion bottles, quilted those, and then came back and fill it in. So it would have changed the way I approached it, and it might have been a little easier. On a long arm, I'm working in rows, working my way down, so I have to add the detail and fill in around it. So it's kind of a little bit different how you approach it. But yeah, absolutely, you can get the same effects, might be even easier on a sewing machine. Do I have the top and bottom thread matching? So if you'd asked me that question even 2 years ago, I would have said yes. But now I'm addicted to pre-wounds. So when I'm quilting her quilt or any quilts on my sewing machine or long arm, I mean, I am totally all in on the pre-wound bobbins. And so I pick a bobbin color in the value of the top color. So I have white, tan, black, all the shades of neutral in the bobbins. But if I'm using that dark green or that bright green on the front, then I'll put like a medium tan on the back. So I'm not matching the color, but I'm matching the value. Again, it's totally up to you though. It doesn't have to be that way. Have I ever used a weighty batting? I have a package of it and wondering how hard it is to quilt on it. I'm guessing weighty batting might be higher loft if I had to guess. I'm not sure. Jessica's like, I don't know. I just wrote down the question. Don't be mad at me. No. If you have a higher loft, if that's what we're talking about, the loft is the thickness of it, the puffiness of it, and doesn't necessarily mean that it's thicker or better quality. It's just going to give you more of a kind of comforter kind of look. You can definitely work with that. You just have to be careful that sometimes you get tucks because it's so like puffy that you'll push the fabric down. But yeah, no, it's fine. If you're worried about it, cut a little section off of your piece and put it in a quilt and see how that works. But yeah, no, as long as it's a good quality batting, it's going to be the way to go. Awesome. Great questions, everybody. And again, if you're not watching live, you can leave it in the comment section and I'll get on there from time to time and answer it. A couple things about the quilt. I like to give details when I can. It is, Tula Pink's fabric collection, which will be coming out, I think June, July. I'm going to have that wrong. It's not out yet, but it'll be out soon. And I think she said that is a pattern. I don't think it's a kit. So if I'm going off remembering what she told me when I asked her. So we will be carrying the fabric in our shop whenever it arrives. So if you're like, I want to get my hands on that, you can definitely pop in our quilt shop and get that. And then next time I work on a quilt for Tula, which she's going to be sending me one here in the next week or so, I'll do another little behind the scenes type of thing. So it's always kind of fun to talk about the process of it because it's kind of interesting to see how it all finally comes together. So, all right, I do have some bad news for y'all. I will not be here next week for the live chat. So I will be in Florida at a guild teaching there. And so, teaching some classes. But I will be back the next week and we will maybe talk. I had a question about how to quilt stars. So maybe we'll do a topic on quilting tips or ideas. But until then, everybody, I hope you have a great rest of your week. I hope you stay safe, have fun quilting, and I will see you in 2 weeks for the next live chat. Until then, everybody, happy quilting.